You ready?
Ready?
Lisa was just all around an amazing person. Anybody that knew Lisa liked her.
She was outspoken. She was very much a personality that would look at something and think, I'm gonna go try it.
She was beautiful. She was just so full of life.
She disappeared. And we were trying to do everything that we could to find her.
It was pretty frightening because every tick of the clock puts Lisa farther and farther away.
I didn't even begin to think about who could have done this to her. It was unbelievable.
It's Wednesday morning. By this time, parents across California's East Bay know their kids' school day is in full swing. But for the family where 18-year-old Lisa Manzo is living, she's just crossed that terrifying line from late to missing. Yesterday, she never made it home from her after-school job, and it's out of character for her not to check in.
Yes, I have to report a missing girl.
Every passing minute ratchets up the fear something terrible has happened.
And then she just didn't come home last night.
But will the Alameda County Sheriff's Office be able to track her down? For Detective Galen Temple, the early signs aren't promising.
We normally get a lot of runaway juveniles. But the foster parents where she lived were sure that she had not run away. She was a responsible person. She had a job. She was a good student. So they were quite upset, and they felt very strongly that something wrong had happened.
Brody, B-R-O-D-I-E.
The search for Lisa consumes the sheriff's office, and no one wants to find her more desperately than Deputy Doug Brody. Lisa is his niece.
It was very rough, trying to keep myself separated from family and being a member of the sheriff's office. I think you just need to continue focusing on the task at hand.
All right, thanks.
He's not officially assigned to the case, but Deputy Brody knows searchers are up against a grim deadline.
It's very critical when a missing person report's filed that you quickly and immediately throw yourself into this case because cases get cold really quick and the clock's ticking.
Deputy Brody isn't the only one watching the clock.
Do you know what the problem she was having at all?
Lisa's family and friends do what they can, but are gripped by a helpless feeling. Lisa's circle is a large one.
This is Lisa?
Everyone who meets her wants to be a part of this remarkable young woman's life.
I watched her grow up and always admired her for her spunkiness and her bubbly personality. She had lots of friends. She was very social.
Lisa does well in school, plays on several sports teams, and to top it all off, she recently earned a lead role in the school play.
Okay, and what we're going to be working on next time is scene 4, so I just want to go over the blocking. Brian?
Her involvement with theater only was something she got into in her senior year. It was something that she hadn't tried before.
Lisa?
We were doing Goldman's Lion in Winter.
Open up a little bit. This is the kissing scene, okay?
I was playing Henry, the King of England, and Lisa's character is the sister to the King of France.
Like the kissing scene.
Now, Henry has a romantic relationship with her at the top of the play, and there's a scene that involves the two of them having to kiss.
What are we doing?
Oh, come on. Okay, we're just...
But you're high school students, and you don't know how to do this, and it's awkward, and the drama teacher's trying to show you how. And Lisa just grabbed me and kissed me. She was very much a personality that would look at something and think, what is this about? I'm gonna go try it.
That's exactly what we need from the blocking for scene 4. Next time. I'll see you soon.
Lisa was special because she just had this drive to be successful. And when she set her mind to something, there was no stopping her. Lisa was the bigger sister I looked up to. I wanted to be just like her.
Peter gave himself up for Lost and shed big tears.
The two sisters are drawn together by love and necessity.
When Lisa was about maybe 12 or 13, she was kind of left up to being the mom, so to speak, and to raise the kids and watch them.
Do you think he's gonna go back for it later, maybe?
And I think that she realized that her parents lacked that ability.
You were home babysitting, right? Right? She falls down, she hurts herself. So where were you?
Lisa had come from a home where the parents were drug addicts.
Where were you?
Excuse me, where were you?
It's a turbulent home life for the young teenager. Lisa is torn between caring for her little sister and desperately wanting out of a bad situation.
You don't support her, you don't do anything.
My parents just didn't have it together.
It's your sister that's suffering here. She's the one that got hurt here because of you. Because of you.
Her parents, they had some issues, and she didn't have a family the way that most kids had a family, and she felt bad about that, I could tell.
You're gonna go by my rules!
At the age of 15, Lisa makes a very tough decision. She leaves home,
Just go!
breaking away from her parents,
Let her go, let her go.
but vowing never to be far from her sister.
Lisa handled that as best she could. She went to live with her friend because she wanted some stability in her life.
Now, Lisa's life could be in danger.
She was always on time for every single rehearsal.
Investigators pour everything they have into the search for the missing teen.
And you can't think of any reason why she might not show up?
No, she was just a great little actress, and she...
Sergeant George Little contacted all of her associates, friends at school, school teachers, anybody that she knew, and tried to find out a reason why she had disappeared.
It doesn't take long for the news of Lisa's shocking disappearance to make its way through San Lorenzo High School.
I think the collective disbelief was pretty remarkable. It's an emotional vulnerability that hits everybody. It was frightening. It's not something you're supposed to experience at all, let alone you're supposed to experience when you're a teenager.
Yeah, I'll hold.
Doug Brody finds it impossible to sit back and watch as others search for the niece he loves so dearly.
Probably made my investigators upset, but I kept saying, did you look at who wasn't at school that next day? Did you see somebody with scratches on his face? Or was there somebody that was absent that had never been absent before?
No one at school knows anything that can help find Lisa.
Office over here, she was heading down.
The sheriff's office tries to retrace her every last move, hoping that will somehow point to where she is now.
So what I'm thinking is, what will...
Detectives learn that before heading to her part-time job, Lisa had a doctor's appointment.
Hope you feel better, Lisa.
Thanks.
And after that, nothing. Lisa never made it to work.
George felt frustrated about not finding any clues or finding anybody that knew her whereabouts. And it was then he said, I am going to follow the route that she took and see if I can find anything.
We begin what is called sometimes a grid search, where we look at the areas, the neighborhood, the path that she may have traveled, based on information that we recovered from people that we talked to.
Retrace her route.
There was a train track that ran right next to the high school, and frequently kids would use the train track as a shortcut.
Of course, the dangers being the trains go through there very fast because there's no station. They generally travel, I would say, 40 to 50 miles an hour.
A couple of guys and walk the most probable route.
Did Lisa take a shortcut across this dangerous stretch of track? It's terrifying to consider the possibilities. Lead investigator, Sergeant George Little, and his team search the railroad tracks near the school and find their first clue. They recover a woman's purse, but there's no wallet inside to identify its owner. Then,
Over here.
everyone's heart stops.
Female. Late teens. Could be our girl.
Is this Lisa Manzo? Scattered across the San Francisco Bay Area in Northern California are dozens of cozy residential communities. Just south of the city of Oakland is one of the quietest, the town of San Lorenzo.
San Lorenzo was basically a sleepy little bedroom community. The crime rate in San Lorenzo was somewhat low, and it was a nice place for people to bring their families and raise them.
But in late November 1984, all of Alameda County is on edge. It's been 48 hours since anyone has heard from 18-year-old Lisa Manzo. And investigators have just made a chilling discovery
Over here.
under a highway overpass. The body of a young woman lying next to the railroad tracks.
Call it in.
I recall getting a phone call from our investigation division around maybe 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening.
Hello?
I would have been the one that was working that evening, but I was on my days off.
Hey, George, how are you?
It was our investigative lieutenant contacting me and saying that they had found a body.
I'll come down as soon as I can, okay?
This quite possibly could be Lisa, and they asked us, myself being the uncle, to come down and identify the body.
Doug Brody fears what awaits him at the end of this drive. The thought is almost more than he can bear.
Every stop sign, every stop light going to that scene, I kept reliving times with Lisa, Lisa's face. One of my most favorite memories of Lisa was when she was actually going to turn 16. She was at our house, living there for a couple weeks, in between other families and such. And I wanted to do something really special. I asked her what her favorite color was, and she said it was purple. Favorite color was purple.
Happy birthday.
So I had a beautiful birthday cake made. And that night we surprised her and had a sweet 16 birthday party for her. That's what I always remember, the look on her face when I walked in the house with this purple cake with her candles. It was really nice. It was really nice.
From the very beginning, Deputy Brody wanted to be more involved in the investigation. But now, it's taking all of his strength to keep from turning back.
I remember walking on the railroad ties. I could almost count them as I was walking. I didn't want to look forward because I knew that I'd see something I didn't really want to see. And when I reached the scene, I saw feet protruding from the ground and continued walking. And I saw her blonde hair and her face and her unclothed body covered with debris and leaves. It was very surreal for me. So I had to make a verbal announcement to the guys that were there that, yes, in fact, it was my niece, Lisa Manzo. Everyone on the case knew that she was my niece. There was sympathy there, and I could see that in their face, but they had to focus on the task at hand also.
With his heart breaking, Deputy Brody knows his night isn't done. He still has to tell Lisa's family the search for her is over.
Every one of them was hoping against hope that when I came through the door, I was going to tell them that it was someone else and that we could still be looking for Lisa. But they knew when I came through the door that it was her, just I'm sure by the look on my face.
This broken family can't believe what they're hearing.
I told myself that that wasn't Lisa. Yeah, I didn't even begin to think about you know, who could have done this to her? It was unbelievable. As a 7-year-old, how do you even begin to process that? You just don't.
It was difficult for me because as mad as I was and as much as I wanted to scream, I had to continue on a professional level to assure them that we would be doing everything we could to find the person that was responsible for it.
Back at the overpass, things are no less emotional as the Alameda County Sheriff's Office struggles to figure out how this popular young girl was killed.
It was obvious from the reports that she had been dead for 2 days and that she had been strangled. Later at the coroner's office, they determined that she had been raped.
DNA testing is not a tool investigators have in 1984.
Everything okay here?
But they can pinpoint the killer's blood type to narrow down potential suspects.
In this type of an investigation, they would gather fingerprints, collect things that we thought were left by the suspect, pieces of evidence that might have fluids or samples on them. We did everything that we could. The thing was that we didn't have a suspect.
The following day at Lisa's school, the mood is somber.
And how about the students? Anything you've heard through them?
For students still shaken by her disappearance, the news of Lisa's murder is too much.
Anytime you have a death in a school community, it reverberates through the faculty, through the student body. You're dealing with kids who are 13 through 18, trying to process that information and trying to process those feelings. There's definitely a loss of innocence connected to all of this. You don't have an understanding. It's too big to understand. Just really tragic.
Police worry that whoever raped and murdered this teenage girl could be primed to strike again. They ramp up their investigation and zero in on those closest to Lisa.
I do remember the police presence and talking to people and interviewing people, looking for witnesses, looking for information.
Do you know Lisa Monzo?
Early on in the investigation, there were many different areas we were looking into. Friends, schoolmates, possible enemies she may have had.
Did she have a fight with somebody? Was there some type of a grudge or hazing where somebody was picking on her? Something like that. Anything that might be a clue.
Trying on all of our new costumes and stuff.
No one can remember seeing anything strange or out of the ordinary, and no one can be placed near the train tracks where she was killed. But one student's story sticks out to detectives.
How do you know Lisa?
Brian Larson's.
Well, we're in school.
Unbelievably, he tells them that Lisa isn't the first young woman murdered in Alameda County he was close to.
But you know what happened to her, right?
Just 6 months earlier, in April of 1984, 18-year-old Julie Connell, from the neighboring community of San Leandro, is abducted and killed.
We dated in '82, and by '84 we were still friends, but not seeing each other, not connected in any way.
Did Lisa and Julie know each other?
No.
Julie's death was still very present for me. When I heard about Lisa's murder, it was just, here we go again. I disbelief, how is this even possible? How is this happening again?
2 local teenage girls murdered within 6 months of each other. For investigators, and especially the students themselves, it leaves a frightening question. Are the young women of Alameda County in danger? As the winter of 1984 approaches, the Alameda County Sheriff's Office in California has a big question to answer. Is there a connection between 18-year-old Lisa Monzo's murder and 18-year-old Julie Connell's 6 months earlier.
Julie Connell was a student at Arroyo High School in San Lorenzo. Julie sat on a blanket and was studying right out in the open while her mother and sister went to a movie. When they came out, she was gone. Julie had been murdered. She was bound behind her back. She had her throat cut. She had been raped. It was a horrible crime scene.
Julie's body is discovered 5 miles up the road from where Lisa is found.
The suspect in the Julie Connell case must have lived in the area because 2 or 3 days after her body was found, her bra and some of her clothing was found just a short distance away. But in reviewing the Julie Connell case, we didn't find any common denominator there. You know, we didn't find anything.
The lack of progress eats away at Lisa's extended family. All they can do is wonder why anyone would harm such a promising and well-respected teen.
She had these aspirations to be in the Navy, wanted to be a nurse there. And I really think that Lisa would have thrived in that environment as nursing because it was a kind of a people skills job. And she always, always loved kids. And I think that's because of the way that she had been raised, kind of on her own.
Sure.
You know, in retrospect, looking at her life and assembling it through memories, she was going to be something.
She was beautiful, smart, just all around an amazing person. I mean, anybody that knew Lisa liked her.
You ready? Ready. Okay. 3.
Lisa pierced my ears for the first time, which was very exciting.
Ow.
Sisters are very close, like best friends.
Oh my God.
Sometimes I'll find an earring and I will think to myself that it's Lisa. You know, just send me a message.
Police are frustrated at not being able to give Lisa's family the answers they so desperately crave. Though Detective Galen Temple thinks they're on the verge of a breakthrough.
These are the results?
Yes, they are.
The lab has finally completed its analysis of the samples they took from the crime scene. Even in 1984, the killer's blood type can be determined by examining seminal fluid.
So it says unable to identify blood type, non-secretor. What does that mean?
But a stroke of bad luck quickly dashes those hopes.
The donor of the fluid on Lisa Monzo was known as a non-secretor. In the world's population, there's a percentage of people, I think it's around 20 or 25%, that do not secrete their ABO blood type into their body fluids. This means you cannot identify a person to that body fluid.
Every road the investigators go down leads to a dead end. Doug Brody is anxious for the investigation to regain momentum.
One of the thoughts that we had was that there's train tracks. And so we were looking at the schedules for the trains to see if there was, in fact, a freight train during that period of time. And then we would wait every day for that same train to see if there were people riding the rails. It was just many, many things we looked at trying to figure out who might have done this.
Prior to her murder, Lisa spent weeks rehearsing with a drama club at San Lorenzo High School for their presentation of The Lion in Winter. Tragically, the show is scheduled to open on the day of her funeral.
Lisa's service was the afternoon. We opened the show. And the seniors in the cast, the 4 of us, went to her service. Drama kids, you know, they're sensitive, and there's something about this personality type that wants to connect and tell stories and finds comfort in each other and opens themselves up emotionally.
For the drama students, the play is a way to put the horror of Lisa's death out of their minds.
The show must go on. We're going to do this for her. We're going to do this in her memory. We're going to press on and do this.
An understudy takes on Lisa's role in the play. But it's not easy for Brian to put aside the sorrow of the afternoon. His head still filled with painful memories.
Break a leg.
The show was incredibly cathartic that night because it was just, I can go be somebody else for a while. Cool, I need to do that right now because I don't want to be me. I want to go tell another story.
Seven years pass, and Lisa's case remains unsolved. No new suspects or clues are uncovered to help investigators track down her killer.
The months went by and years went by, and it was very disheartening that we couldn't solve this case. What was frightening, too, is that we had no quick leads. Usually those things come to the surface pretty quickly. You figure out who it might be, and you have a lead. You maybe take somebody for questioning, but it just was cold, ice cold.
Those who knew and loved the promising young student asked themselves, after all this time, why has no one come forward with any information on Lisa's murder? Will her killer ever be brought to justice? By 1991, 7 years have passed since the rape and murder of 18-year-old Lisa Manzo. And the weight of the unsolved crime is destroying her family.
My mother was never the same after Lisa's death. How do you, as a parent, lose a child? I mean, I couldn't imagine. You would think that someone wouldn't sink into a deeper hole, but she did.
As a member of the law enforcement community, my family and some friends always asked about what was going on or what we had heard.
Brody.
But there was nothing else to share except old business. And with all the resources we had, I couldn't believe that. How could someone get away with this? As the case grew colder, still not hearing anything was very, very frustrating. Very frustrating for me.
This is the year Detective John Reasoner gets assigned to the Alameda County Sheriff's Office Homicide Division.
Evidence of injury or treatment.
His first order of business is to review the department's open investigations, including Lisa Manzo's.
Nobody was really working on it. It was just a review, waiting for some new information to come forward that we could act on.
Like Detective Galen Temple before him, he looks for any possible connections between Lisa's murder and others in the area.
I recall the task force being assembled sometime in the late 1980s, and they were reviewing all of the young female homicides in the area, attempting to find a common thread.
Similar.
It's astonishing. 3 female victims were murdered in the 12 months prior to Lisa's murder. Could a serial killer have been working in Alameda County?
Kelly Poppleton was killed on Killcare Road in Sunol. Tina Fales was a Pleasanton homicide. She was murdered on her way home from school. Julie Connell was kidnapped from a park in the city of Hayward. She was found days later in an open corral in the rural area. What linked the homicides together, in most people's minds, was the age of the girls.
Despite the close proximity of the murders and the short time period between them, the investigation finds no indication these women fell victim to the same predator.
One is Julie.
Tina Fales was stabbed. Julie Connell, had her throat cut. Lisa Manzo was strangled. Generally, a killer, if he's a serial killer, will be doing these things the same way.
2 that were 14 years old.
Each of these teenagers has a family begging for answers, but every one of their cases remains unsolved.
The public was very uneasy about the 4 homicides involving the young girls. Yes, the press is constantly asking about these. But after 7 years, that sort of goes away.
2 more years pass, and family and friends are still in pain. No one, it seems, has anything to say about Lisa's murder. It's a long time to keep a secret. So detectives working the case are surprised when they're contacted.
I received a letter from our headquarters that was sent from an inmate in Walla Walla, Washington State Prison.
Rick Danielson, a convicted murderer, types a letter to police claiming an old cellmate of his admitted to committing a murder in Northern California for which he was never caught.
In the letter that he wrote, he mentioned that it was along railroad tracks and that there was some kind of an overcrossing. I thought this describes the crime scene of Lisa Monzo.
Danielson identifies the man as Michael Ide, a convicted rapist and murderer currently serving a life sentence in Washington.
Myself and my partner, who is Detective DeCoste, received permission to go to Walla Walla, Washington, and talk to this inmate.
When an informant in prison or in jail comes up with information, you don't know if he's really telling the truth. Quite often, many of these informants simply want cigarettes or something, so you really have to verify what they say.
So, Mr. Danielson, we got your letters.
Detectives Reasoner and DeCoste can't wait to hear this inmate's story. They travel 800 miles to get it in person.
That he had been drinking.
As Danielson relays the conversations he had with Michael Ide behind bars, detectives know he can't be making this stuff up.
He choked her out.
He ended up doing a little diagram of what Michael Ide had told him.
It's my understanding that this sketch, if you laid it over the top of the scene, was just absolutely very accurate, as if he was there, but couldn't have because he was in custody.
He didn't really ask us for anything. He didn't ask us to go to the parole board or anything like that. So based on all that information, we felt the information was credible.
Slow, went off around the trees.
Michael Ide was first convicted of rape in 1978 after sexually assaulting 32-year-old Gloria Hazelwood in Alameda County. He's released in 1982, putting him right near Lisa Monzo at the time she's killed.
We know he was paroled in Alameda County. We know he lived a mile or so from the Lisa Monzo residence.
Ide, looking to hide from his past, then moves to Vancouver, Washington with his girlfriend. His days of freedom are cut short in 1986 when a passerby interrupts him attempting to rape a woman in her car. Ide runs off, leaving his wallet behind. After his arrest, police link him to the rape and murder of 69-year-old Ellen Parker. He's sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
Michael Ide. We drove to Monroe, Washington, and we began interviewing him.
Recognize that girl?
He didn't really admit to anything. He didn't admit to the murder or anything like that. But you have to remember that Michael Ide had been in prison for a while. So, of course, he's prison hardened.
Ide gives them nothing. But the detectives have an ace up their sleeve. They know from one of his arrest reports that he's a non-secretor, which means his blood type isn't identified in his body fluids. It's the same rare condition as Lisa's killer. Combine this with his cellmate's knowledge of the crime scene, and it's more than enough for detectives to obtain a warrant for samples of Ide's DNA. They'll be compared to samples taken at the crime scene 9 years ago.
At that point, we went back to Washington and served the search warrant on Michael Ide.
He has no choice but to give up the samples. After all these years, will Lisa Manzo's killer finally be exposed? It's 9 years since Lisa Manzo's unspeakable murder. Could detectives finally be face to face with her killer? Despite the mounting evidence against him,
You recognize that girl?
prison inmate Michael Ide refuses to admit to the crime. But detectives have a warrant for his DNA.
We recovered blood, hair, and saliva, and then we returned to California with it. It was analyzed by the Alameda County Crime Lab against body fluids taken from Lisa Manzo.
Detectives are thrilled, but not at all surprised by the results.
After the DNA analysis came back, that Michael Ide was mathematically the only one in 13 billion that could have done this. At that point, we went further into his background. We talked to ex-wives and friends and people that he associated with in the area at that time. They all put him in the area at the time of the Lisa Manzo case. All that was good corroborating evidence to go along with the DNA case.
He had been drinking.
Had Rick Danielson, Ide's former cellmate, never come forward, Lisa's case may never have been solved.
For me, it was a strange twist. Being in law enforcement my entire career, to be so thankful for a murder, could have gave the guy a hug.
On December 9th, 1994, detectives charge Michael Ide with a rape and murder of Lisa Manzo.
Based on what we learned late last month regarding the DNA results, we in effect have the smoking gun 9 years later.
I speak for the family and we're very pleased that there's some finality coming now after such a long wait.
The day that I got a call from the Alameda County District Attorney's Office telling me that the suspect had been arrested and we'd be going to trial. That was a great day, a great feeling. Even though I'd been retired for many years, it was a very satisfying thing.
At the trial, Lisa's former classmates hope justice will finally be served.
It's definitely still thought about. People have not forgotten it after 12 years.
Inside the courtroom, the jury hears about the tragic events surrounding Lisa's murder. It was Ide's girlfriend's birthday, and rather than celebrate with her and their new baby, he spends his day drinking by the train tracks. A few blocks away, Lisa leaves her doctor's appointment and, in a rush to get to work, takes a shortcut. Her route takes her to the overpass and into the twisted view of Michael Ide.
Michael Ide simply laid in wait. She was just a random victim. It could have been anyone. Michael Ide was on a sexual power trip with women, and he'd kill them once he had sex with them, once he forced them to have sex.
Stop it! Help!
Ide sexually assaults Lisa and then strangles her to death. He covers her body with leaves and pine needles and heads for home. It takes a jury just over 36 hours to find Michael Ide guilty. On January 3rd, 1997, he's sentenced to death. 8 years later, he dies in prison of natural causes.
I recently learned that after he murdered Lisa, Ide found out where she lived, and he went to the house and pretended to be a grieving friend of Lisa's. and sat there with them and was like, who could have done this to Lisa? This is so horrible. And all the while, he was the one who did it. I mean, how could someone ever just be so cold to just do that? He was a very sick individual.
And what of the other young women in Alameda County who were murdered within the same year as Lisa?
Robert Rose was identified and arrested, and he was proven to be guilty of the murder of Julie Connell. Tina Fale's case was solved. The body was found just over the fence from where this young man lived. They proceeded and had the evidence to convict him.
Kelly Poppleton's murder remains unsolved. Her loved ones still desperate to bring her case to a close.
She was only 17 miles.
For Lisa's family and friends, the guilty verdict helps them deal with their loss.
When I learned that Lisa's murder had been solved, it's not closure, but it's about being able to say, I know now, I know what happened, so.
I think this incident changed me in a way that when in law enforcement we ask people to do things or we take reports from people that things that had happened to them, and going through this helped me to help others get through this type of incident.
Doug isn't the only family member to be forever changed by Lisa's murder. Her sister Kathleen also finds hope and inspiration in the midst of tragedy.
She took on the career in law enforcement. She works for our agency, Alameda County Sheriff's Office. She's a deputy sheriff. So, you know, those days that she spent with her big sister, I think she was able to impart some things on Kathleen that Kathleen takes with her today to make her who she is.
Once I had made the decision to get into law enforcement, I wanted to work for Alameda County Sheriff's Office.
You ready? Ready.
A lot of the reason is because they brought Lisa's murderer to justice.
Ow.
I miss her.
You okay?
That's never gonna go away. I wish Lisa was here so that she could see how I turned out.